Good evening, and welcome to the candidate forum for the race for the New York State Assembly District 125 seat. I'm Laura Ladd Bierman, Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of New York State, and I will be the moderator for this forum. The timekeeper is Sheila Cohen, who is also on the screen. Sheila, want to raise your hand? Say hi. Thank you. Thank you to the candidates in this race, Anna Kellis and Matthew McIntyre, for participating in this forum. I would like to remind the candidates, their campaigns, and the audience that any unauthorized recording of this forum is prohibited to ensure that the content of the forum is not manipulated in any way to create false or misleading impressions of the candidates. The complete forum will be posted on the League's websites and YouTube after the event. Both candidates and campaigns have agreed to this policy. The candidates have also agreed not to interrupt each other or the moderator during the forum. As moderator, I do have the authority to pause the forum or turn off a candidate's mic if any personal attacks or inappropriate comments are being made. Questions being asked tonight have been submitted by the public and reviewed by a League committee in advance to avoid redundancy. The format for tonight is as follows. There will be opening statements of 1 minute each, questions and answers limited to one minute each, and a closing statement of 2 minutes each. Each candidate is also entitled to 2 rebuttals of 30 seconds each during the question and answer period. Sheila Cohen, the timekeeper, will hold up signs when a candidate has 30 seconds left and when they must stop speaking. Before going live tonight, a coin was flipped to decide the order for the candidates to respond. The order of answering questions will alternate between the 2 candidates. Let's begin. The first opening statement will be made by Mr. McIntyre.
Good evening. John Locke once said that the role of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. That is what the role of government is to be. Within New York State, we have got away from that. And that's what I am running on and what I'm running to bring back to the sense of government.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
Hi, my name is Anna Kellis, and I'm running to represent our district in the State Assembly. I've served as a Tompkins County legislator for the past 5 years, consistently passing legislation improving human health and protecting the environment. Right now, we are facing an economic crisis brought on by COVID-19. Thousands of district residents have lost their jobs, access to food, and even their homes. These impacts cut across communities, but disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities. To address these pressing issues, I will continue to prioritize the health of our families, including universal and affordable childcare and healthcare, a right to die with dignity, racial justice, environmental protection, workforce redevelopment, and housing as a human right. As a county lawmaker, I have passed every piece of legislation that I have brought to a bipartisan legislature. I have effectively governed in a county with a mix of both urban and rural constituents. We are in the middle of a deadly pandemic, and I would be the only public health scientist in the Assembly. I'm the right woman for these times to represent us in Albany as our next state assembly person.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Now we will begin the section with questions and answers. As I said, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. 2 rebuttals during the entire event will also be allowed for each candidate with 30 seconds each. Dr. Kellis will answer the first question. If you are elected, what is the first thing you will do?
I think that it's very important to focus on the rebuilding of our economy. Right now, we are facing a pandemic of proportions we have not seen in a century. So focusing on workforce development, focusing on making sure that people have stable housing and access to childcare, we've identified is an absolute critical role. People need that to be able to get back to their jobs. And the other thing that I focus on, universal childcare, but also universal healthcare. People right now are prisoned to their jobs because they provide healthcare or do not provide healthcare. And we have a gig economy where there's so many jobs that no longer provide healthcare. So these things are absolutely critical collectively to help people get back to work and to rebuild our economy.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre?
So if I'm elected first day in, my goal is, as Anna has said, to rebuild the economy. That is vital. The economy of the area has been destroyed, not only just by small businesses, but also by the amount of revenue that has been lost due to the colleges and everything closing down. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to do that in one of two ways. Our government is a very, very big barrier to entry for a lot of entrepreneurs starting their business through different regulations, licensings, and bureaucracy that we have to go through as small business owners in order to make that buck. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to look at the unneeded licensing and regulation and reduce those or eliminate those to allow more small businesses to open up and to get through and build our economy back up.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. The next question will go to Mr. McIntyre first. How can New York State assure that adequate, affordable childcare is provided for all children of all ages? Mr. McIntyre.
That's a great question. I have a policy for this, and we're gonna go and we're gonna allow more nonprofit organizations called children gardens. This is something very large that they do in Europe with great success. What it is it's going to be a nonprofit organization, so therefore they don't have to pay out a lot of the costs that a normal daycare provider will have. But with that, you still have the background checks and everything of your childcare provider. That's going to target single mothers and families of lower income to allow them to take their kids there for childcare at little to no cost to them. And on your off days, you can go and provide your services back.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
I think it's really critical for us to note that 85% of the brain is developed in the first 3 years of life. Those years are absolutely critical. And we have a social system right now for K through 12 that allows everyone to go to school for free. That it's a taxpayer system. And I think that that's really important to note that we're missing that really important window. Our return on investment, we know in childcare is about $17 to $18 per $1 invested in childcare. So I am a huge supporter of universal childcare. We know that the federal subsidy system is not working. We need to revamp that. I will fight to push at the federal level that is addressed, that funding is put in for that. And at the state level, we invest sufficiently. Right now, we know because of this pandemic, potentially 50% of the childcare facilities will not reopen their doors. They need financial support and they need it now. We need a stimulus package. That is something that I would fight for at the federal level. And I will fight for state funding so we can get that $17 to $18 on a return on our investment, which will pay back dividends both for parents to be able to re-enter the economy and for children to be able to reach their full potential, as well as be able to afford or paying for good quality job wages.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. The next question will go to Dr. Kellis first. Are you in favor of increasing unemployment benefits and minimum wage?
Absolutely. I think that the living wage is exactly that. It is what people need to live. What we have also found with respect to the living wage, when a living wage is provided, people contribute back to their local economy. So it is overall an incredible way to stabilize the economy. As far as unemployment insurance, it absolutely needs to meet the needs, not just to keep a mediocre lifestyle, but to be able to put yourself back on your feet and be able to then get back into a stable place where you can afford the time to support your family and maintain stable housing, seek the education you need to be able to move forward on your own ability. That needs to be there to restabilize people when they have lost their jobs. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
No. And it's simple. I'm not going to push for an increase in minimum wage that's going to increase the prices. It's going to drive the market. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to offer and push for better vocational training for the trades, make it more accessible for people. The average age of a tradesman in New York State right now is 54 years old. Okay, that is far too high. A lot of these people have been doing it for 20, 30, 35 years. You know, they want to get out of it. So no, the answer is I'm not going to push for an increase in minimum wage or an increase in benefits coming from unemployment. We're going to push for better training, both in the trades and other industries, more vibrant industries that we have in this area.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. The next question will go to you first. In light of the problems across the country around police shootings and brutality and our inequitable justice system, how would you improve policing and the criminal justice system in New York State? Mr. McIntyre.
I'm glad this is a question that has been asked. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push it back to the counties, and the state's going to be there to help this. And at the state level, we're going to have to do this with the state police as well. When they submit to the legislation and everything for their budget, okay, they're going to have to show a certain percentage of training. They're not buying new gadgets. They're not buying new cars. They're going to be showing that they have a certain amount dedicated to cultural and diversity training, socioeconomics, different hand-to-hand combat, more in the idea of jiu-jitsu where it's dealing with restraints, de-escalation, and they're going to have to hire on to their staff social workers, substance abuse workers in place of certain officers. This is stuff that we need to have. When I was in the Marine Corps, we had these trainings and we were better suited when we were in country. This is what we need to bring to our police officers. We need to go through their budget.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
Yeah, I think that it's absolutely critical that we reevaluate and reimagine the system. We need to focus on alternatives to incarceration to reduce recidivism rates. Absolutely, end of story. There are recovery and wellness courts, otherwise referred to in some cases as mental health courts, drug courts, family courts, but also alternatives to incarceration like reentry, retraining, jobs training. We also need to focus on the public defender system. We absolutely need to have enough civil and criminal representation for individuals, particularly coming out of this pandemic. For example, we are going to have a massive increase in evictions that will be happening once this moratorium is removed. We need to be able to support people in order to keep people in their homes and keep the system working. There are an infinite number of public health measures that we could prioritize, and those things are currently being done by the police, community outreach workers, for example. Those need to be shifted to public health workers that are prioritized and trained in those, and not necessarily law enforcement doing that work.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. And a similarly related question on law enforcement, Dr. Kellis, how can we support our police dealing with people experiencing unusual stress, including mental health issues, food insecurity, unemployment, and homelessness?
I think we need to, I think we need to support law enforcement by building up and financing and supporting programs that support trained professionals in those fields. For example, we have in Tompkins County a community outreach worker. So there are other options. Instead of having to call the police to address issues of mental health or disturbances of, downtown in the business sector, we can reach out to the community outreach worker who's trained as a caseworker to de-escalate the situation and to help this, the individual reach services that might help, for example, housing, DSS connecting to mental health support, also a mobile crisis unit, so that police can call the mobile crisis unit to come out to a scene and assess for mental health situation so that they can be directed to mental health support if needed, instead of the enforcement or criminal system exclusively.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
It goes off of what I just previously said off the last question. We need more training. We also need to go and train our dispatchers, 911 call centers and everything. That way we make sure that they are routing these calls to the correct departments. I can't tell you how many times I've heard within the past few months of people calling, letting me know, hey, my neighbor called the cops to get a baby bird that fell out of a tree. Well, that's not the cops' responsibility. That you contact DEC. We need to train the 911 call centers. We need to provide our officers with better training in all aspects, and we need to provide them some PTSD training, and how to deal with PTSD and give them those services to deal with that, so that they are more level-headed when they're dealing with the populace.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. I now have a couple of questions on healthcare issues. Mr. McIntyre, you'll get the first question. Do you believe in universal healthcare access? If so, what will you do to make it a reality for all New Yorkers? If not, why not?
No. We already have a system in place. Okay. What we need to do is we need to attack the healthcare industry. We need to make the pricing more transparent, much more like an auto garage. That way, when you go in, you know exactly what you're paying for. But what we can also do is, since we're going to leave that system in place, what we can do is then go and offer, and this is happening in New York City, a lot of the places, even in Ithaca, there's groups of individuals that have pooled their money together, and they have doctors and medical facilities that are within these networks that they pay $500 a year and $5 every time, or $15, whatever they deem accessible, every time they go to the doctor, and that's the network that they stay in. It makes it cheaper, it makes it more affordable, and it makes it more accessible to everybody without having government involvement.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
Yeah, I am in support of universal health care. Right now, we have a third of our population that is on Medicaid, and we have a Medicaid cost that is pretty expensive, and it doesn't meet the needs of the people. We know that it is essentially a regressive tax. We know that we have a gig economy right now, and people have fewer and fewer people actually get coverage. So it is unattainable for a lot of people. People are trapped in their jobs because it provides healthcare, not because it's actually what they're good at and what they can contribute to the community. So I am a very strong supporter of universal healthcare. It is a system that has been found by research that it would be actually cheaper than the existing system that we have, that it would control runaway costs that currently exist, that we would have an oversight and a cap on premiums. It is consistently evaluated as a cheaper way to go and meets the needs of all people for healthcare. I think that it's also quality that we're looking for.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. I think Mr. McIntyre would like 30 seconds more as a rebuttal.
Yes, going off of what Dr. Kellis has said, we're gonna take a system. We're not gonna fix the industry that is setting these prices. We're going to use the government to cap their prices. We're going to add more money to a problem without actually fixing the thing. Therefore, it's not necessarily going to work because of the market. Market factors are going to take an effect, and it is not going to be as effective as we're hoping. Here's another thing that we got to think of too, is when you start doing, 30 seconds. Is that the down there, or am I looking for the red?
I know. I believe so. Sheila, that was 30 seconds, right? Okay.
Okay, I'm looking for the red. All right.
Okay, we're all good. All good. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. I have another healthcare question, and it'll go to Dr. Kellis first. What measures would you take to assure basic healthcare for all residents, and how would you address the high cost of healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, going back to my previous question, there is, one major study that was done from Yale University. There was another one that was done, a more conservative one that was done by the Rand Institute, and another one that was done, and I am forgetting his name right now, but that was done by a New York State researcher. All three of those found that that the cost of universal healthcare that would cover everyone's needs is actually more cost effective than our existing system that only covers a third of people. So if you think about it, it would allow people, so I didn't see a yellow card. Is that 30 seconds or is that a minute?
Hang
All right,
on.
I think I have 30 seconds left. So
Yes.
so I think that that it is also really important to know that it will affect our labor force, because if people are able to focus on where their expertise is and what they're really good at, the productivity level that we can expect is higher. So it'll take that off the table, and it will allow us to control costs universally.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
So yeah, what we're going to do to lower costs is we're going to eliminate the cartel structure that is within the medical industry. So as it sits right now, you go to the doctor, you go for your checkup, they do all the labs. Your insurance, you hope, pays a vast majority of it, and then you get your bill later. And you're quite frankly, you're looking at it and you're not understanding it and everything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate the cartels by making everything more transparent. With that, automatically you could start shopping around. All right, we're going to open this like any other commodity to the market factors that are there in place. It's been working elsewhere. They do it all the time down in the city. And that's where a vast majority of the great doctors are and whatnot.
Okay, I think Dr. Kellis would like 30 seconds more, Sheila. Go ahead, Dr. Kellis.
I think that, it's important to note that the reason that it would be more cost effective is because you would not have the premiums. You would not have the tremendous amount of administrative overhead for doctors' offices trying to juggle all of the different types of insurances. And it is also, universal healthcare is designed as a progressive tax rather than a regressive tax. It is based on what you're able to pay into the system, both as an individual as well as a company. So it's really important to know that that is the way that it would be doing the cost savings. And it ultimately gives people full choice rather than being stuck within their insurance company's
choices.
Thank
you, Dr. Kellis. And just as a reminder, you each have one more card to use during the debate. So just a reminder. Okay, Mr. McIntyre, you will answer this question first. Do you support diversity training for all employers and employees, public and private, in New York State?
Absolutely. When I'm not doing this, I am a production manager. My workforce is made up of, I got refugees from the Congo, from Kenya, from, where's the other gentleman from? Mozambique, I think he is. He's lived all over Europe. All right. We've actually just gone through this with my supervisors. Because of the different cultural aspects and the different, diversity that we have there, we're not tapping into the benefits and the talents of these people because of the different cultures and not being able to relate. So absolutely, these institutions and businesses should be doing this. If not, they're not capitalizing on the talent that they have in-house.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a super important question. We've actually just created a new position in Tompkins County of a workforce diversity and inclusion position. We have done a climate survey throughout the county and instituted a task force for diversity. We have a workforce diversity and inclusion committee. I have found all of those to be amazingly important because we are fighting 400 years of a racist system. We have structural racism that people do not necessarily are able to identify. For example, if we do all of our hiring based on purely education and job experience, but we have structural racism within access to education and access to job experience, then we will continue to support a racist system itself. We need to have diversity training so that we can identify those small biases, the unconscious biases, and the structural racism that exists in our very system itself. I think that is critical for moving forward, and it's about time. It's way past due.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. I have a couple of questions now on the issue of climate change, and Dr. Kellis, you'll answer this first question first. What further legislation would you introduce to slow down and mitigate the harms of climate change in our geographically diverse state?
No, it's a great question, one that I think we could all talk on for hours and hours. But if I am elected, the things that I want to focus on, we know that methane is one of the greatest greenhouse gas emitters, actually stronger than carbon dioxide. And the two greatest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions through methane is our buildings and our transportation. So we have to focus on those if we want the biggest bang for our buck. Absolutely building renewable infrastructure, but we must focus on, for example, tax credits on weatherizing old buildings. We need to put restrictions on incorporating in natural gas into any new infrastructure. And we need an electrification of our transportation system with a priority on public transportation. With that electrification system itself, more and more being contributed to by renewable energy.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, so what I would be pushing for if elected is for the deregulation of hemp. Follow me here. Hemp is a great scrubber of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. It actually scrubs the environment better than 4 or 5 acres of trees. With the amount of regulation that we have on hemp right now, it is extremely difficult for a lot of people to get involved. So if we loosen up the regulations, more people will be able to do it. We will actually have more hemp, which also provides a better product. Another thing I'm going to push for is to have a more reliable energy source of a stage 4 or a level 4 nuclear reactor. They produce 0 to no CO2 emissions. The energy output is phenomenal. It's world class. And the ability for them to melt down has been rectified due to the problems in Fukushima.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. And I believe Dr. Kellis would like 30 seconds more on this question, Sheila.
Two separate things that I want to say with respect to regulation currently on hemp. It's actually quite important. One of the things about regulation is that it determines what level of THC is in hemp. It can be too high. And if it is too high, right now in the system, it can't go into circulation. They have to burn it and they lose their entire crop. So creating systems where that can be monitored so they don't lose their crop is actually a benefit to farmers. The other thing that I would point out, I'm absolutely a supporter of hemp. I would also say we need green jobs. We need green infrastructure for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre, you will answer first on the next question. Climate change is here now and is getting much worse. 99% of the world climate scientists say human use of fossil fuels is one of the prime causes. Do you agree? If so, how would you, as an elected government official, act to slow down climate change?
I do agree. I do think we are accelerating the emissions of greenhouse gas into the environment, speeding up this climate change. What I would do is we would have to push for better alternatives, more solar, really looking at wind, harnessing some sort of fuel cell technology. I know they've been trying to use that in cars. Elon Musk is working on something for that. And that's the kind of energy that we need to be producing, and that's the stuff that we will be able to utilize for long periods of time.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
Yeah, I think that we absolutely need to focus on electrification of our grid through solar and wind, offshore wind, as well as onshore wind. But we also deeply need to focus on efficiency of our system. So making sure that there's tax incentives for improving the envelope of buildings, doing passive house for residential, or net zero, prioritizing net zero. I talked earlier about transportation being very critical. I do not feel, for example, people talk about nuclear as a transition fuel or as a transition. I do not feel that that is realistic. It not only takes much longer to build, but it is much more expensive. Even though the government currently subsidizes it tremendously, it is still way more expensive, 4 to 5 times more expensive than solar or wind, that can be put up much more quickly. And the return on the investment with significant lower risk. So I think putting all of our efforts into that renewable energy infrastructure is very critical.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Dr. Kellis, you'll answer this question first. What should New York State do to help our small farmers survive? And do you support using subsidies or credits to help these farmers? Dr. Kellis.
Yeah, I think that is one of the most central areas where we absolutely need focus, because one of the greatest ways that we can address climate change is carbon sequestration in our soils. The existing industrial system that we have has significantly reduced the ability for soils to retain any carbon. But farmers need to be supported and financially specifically in order to use regenerative agricultural practices that lead to carbon sequestration. That can be tax incentives, that can be payments specifically for investments in carbon sequestration related practices. Forming a carbon market specifically for farmers, as long as it doesn't give companies a total buy to continue to do polluting practices in order to, to offset, or using this system in order to offset their polluting practices. So I think there are absolutely systems in place.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, I think we absolutely need to support our farmers. One thing that I would love to do for our farmers is to take them out of the ability to where they can't go to like the SBA to get business loans. The SBA offers better rates and everything as opposed to their agricultural loans that they have to get now. We need to treat them as if they're just another business. That way it opens up more funding opportunities for them. As it sits right now, the interest rates on these, they're living tooth to nail, and we need to provide them a better way to get funding.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. The next question will go to you first, Mr. McIntyre. What kind of support and assistance do small businesses in New York State need at this time?
Everything. No, realistically, I'm a small business owner myself. For me, in my industry, there's really not much that the state can do. But for other people, we had a lady close up her art business here in Cortland. Great place. We need to be able to provide these people the ability to, keep their costs down. That right there is offsetting everything. A lot of the commodities and small businesses, people want to shop local, they want to shop small business, but they can't afford it because the costs offset everything else. And a lot of those costs are, regulatory fees and everything. And it's not just at the state level, that's at the federal level as well. There's a lot of fees in order to open a business and licensing and everything, that if you're a small income or a low income person that has a desire to open a business, you can't.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis.
Yeah, something that Matthew said that I really appreciate is helping small businesses reduce their costs. And I'm going to go back to the New York Health Act and universal childcare. Two of the biggest expenses that are faced right now. The first one is healthcare for small businesses. You remove that cost, that shackle from existing small businesses, and you will free up significant funding for them to be able to run their business. The second one is that employees need to decide right now between working and being able to raise children. They should not have to make that decision. So increasing the quality of the existing workforce and access, that can happen with universal childcare that I think is exceptionally important. Some companies actually take money to provide that, recognizing that they can't get the employees without it. Taking that off the table, both of those will significantly increase the funding that is available for small businesses. That's a start.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. And I believe Mr. McIntyre would like 30 seconds more, Sheila.
Yeah, so being, most small businesses, just by their nature, they have their workforce is 70% of their cost is going to be the workforce. So either it be salary, benefits, or whatever. Okay. When a lot of people say small businesses, they're thinking of the small mom and pop shops in the area. Their workforce works off of part-time. So they're already utilizing.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. The next question goes to Dr. Kellis first. What should New York State do to address the problem of runoff from farms and roads into our lakes and streams?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that we currently have in place is that there's supposed to be a setback from spreading manure or spreading waste from the farming practices, and those need to be enforced because that creates runoff. We also have a ditch system that is antiquated and actually exacerbates the speed of water through those ditch systems. And so there are existing new technologies like rain ditches that would actually trap and slow down the rate of the runoff. And the last thing is I'm going to throw out something crazy, but the use of pyrolysis units, which gives an alternate for farmers. Instead of spreading their waste, they could use dewetting and then a pyrolysis unit that would burn the raw material in a vacuum and without oxygen, which would create biofuel, biochar that they could use instead of fertilizers on the land. It would create energy and it would create heat to fuel the system. So creating technologies like that is important.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, so some things we could look at is we could look at what other states have done in this country. So California has a great system that they have to prevent runoff to the oceans and into the Colorado River, which is a very large water supply for Southern California. We can look at their system, what they've been implementing. I know when I lived out there, it was a very good system. What else we could look at is natural abilities and things. Since we already have the ditch, our ditch system, we can look at plants, rocks, natural scrubbers that we have in the area to scrub these waters before they hit our systems.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. How would you provide for more equitable education funding for pre-K through 12 students in all areas of New York State? Mr. McIntyre, to you first.
So one way we could look at it is get rid of the funding by test scores. Okay. As it sits, I got looking at it one night. The city of Syracuse actually gets less funding per school than the Homer Central School District. And it's based off of test scores. So we would eliminate that. But then also what we would do is we would redo our education system. We would, by us doing that, we would actually be able to get rid of some administrators, which would be able to provide cost savings and actually save us money in the long run that would be able to provide better funding for the schools.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened I think it was in 2006, there was a court case decision that ultimately ended up in the creation of foundation aid that the state was required to pay into to create equity between the schools. So schools that had less funding, because the system currently, broken system, is based on property tax, which means that wealthier neighborhoods will invariably have more money for their schools. It's supposed to create equity in that. That has been gutted. $4 million has not been replaced into that system over the last couple of years. That absolutely needs to be replaced. Secondly, 20% of our educational system is at threat of being cut. We are currently facing deficits right now because it's being withheld. That needs to be addressed. There was a huge cut in this last budget, and it was backfilled with stimulus funding from the federal government. And we need to make sure that that is replenished next year, as well as the foundation aid to create equity. And finally, address the system as it is. Funding on property tax does not work as a sole form of funding.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. And to you, Dr. Kellis, what criteria would you set for assuring all residents have access to an affordable college education?
Yeah, so the Excelsior program that it currently exists, that was put in place to create free education, 4-year education, it doesn't qualify, as I understand, for 2-year education. You also have to be a full-time student. It doesn't cover room and board. It doesn't cover books. So it's not accessible for the students that may actually be the student population that we want to prioritize. So I think that it's really important to re-emphasize our focus on community colleges, make sure that that funding is met. The state is supposed to put 1/3 of the funding for community college is supposed to come from the state. It never has. That needs to be met. And that we need to make sure that the Excelsior program, if we keep it, is accessible for the population that we're really trying to target, that are the most marginalized populations. I also want to add that we would also, I think, benefit from micro-credential programs and partnering with unions so that we can create that system as a means to quality, high-paying jobs.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, so what I would do is actually, this is going to sound crazy, but I would actually pull funding from the schools. The reason be it is, if you look at it historically, when the government started giving out funding for people to go to school via student loans, grants, this and that, the tuition consistently went up. Now, yes, you could factor in inflation, but the rate that it went up was substantial enough because it's guaranteed money. So we would do that. But also, like Anna said, we need to pair with trade unions. We need to pair with vocational schools, you know, the community colleges, to really push these trades that we need. We're going to need these people. We're going to, and you know, you can make a great living as a tradesman, and they have great benefits. We need to really push the idea of trades back into our communities and back into schooling.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Okay, the next question has 3 parts to it. So, and it'll go to Mr. McIntyre first. Does the New York State tax system need overhauling? And if so, how? Would you do away with property taxes? And how would you handle unfunded state mandates? All in 1 minute, Mr. McIntyre.
It's easy. I'm a libertarian. Yes, we need to redo the tax code completely. How would we do it? Get rid of income tax. No, there's ways that we could fund state projects and state programs minus the mandate and legal plunder called taxation. All right. We need to not look at taxing this and that to go and fund what we want to, what we need to get done. There's ways we could do it with nonprofits, corporations. So yes, it needs to be overhauled. Would I be willing to look at property taxes? Absolutely. Property taxes, you should be paying property taxes while you have a mortgage on your house. After that, the government shouldn't have a right to come in and take your property if you don't pay the property taxes after that.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you all set? Okay. Does the New York State tax system need overhauling? And if so, how? Would you do away with property taxes? And how would you handle unfunded state mandates?
Yeah, I've been dealing with those for 5 years. I think, I would go in the other direction. I wouldn't get rid of property taxes, but we need to create more equity so that those who can afford to pay are the ones who are paying. I will go in the other direction and say, I am very much in support of the concept of taxing the rich. I think that we need a billionaire's tax. I think an ultra-millionaire's tax as well. And these are the people who have actually increased their wealth by 7 to 8% in the last 9 months. Hundreds of billions of dollars of increase in funding. I would also close the loopholes that exist in Wall Street, the stock buyback, stock transfer tax also. I would close those loopholes. And I think that these could be used to significantly support a lot of the programs, particularly unfunded mandates. The trickle down of that, or the sort of faucet of that down to counties, paying for counties, is crippling counties and increasing the property tax. That needs to be solved at the state level.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. The next question will go to you first, Dr. Kellis. Many rural areas do not have adequate access to Wi-Fi. This is a particular problem during the pandemic. What would you do as a legislator to provide Wi-Fi access to everyone in the state? Dr.
I'm
Kellis.
so glad you asked this. I've been eating, breathing, sleeping, drinking broadband for the last 2 months, 3 months to try and address this issue. I have been working with the Southern Tier Network, which is a nonprofit, municipally owned regional broadband system. We are actually looking to fund a study that would allow them to not only do the middle mile, but the final mile. This allows that their regional system is what allows them to spread the cost. It allows them to create economies of scale, allows them to bargain with companies. It also decreases if a nonprofit that is municipally owns the network of wires itself. It will increase competition for the ISPs. It'll increase the number of ISPs that are providing service on those wires, and it will allow us to reach universal level of broadband, which we currently don't have. And not just that, but the speeds that we need. So addressing under service and no service, both of them are absolutely critical.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes. So what I would be doing when if I get elected is to incentivize the providers that already have the infrastructure in place. Incentivize them by either tax cuts or whatever way we could incentivize these companies to get their product to the people that need it the most. All right. We can look at even nonprofits, but we're going to be incentivizing companies to get this done.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Next question goes to you again. What is your position on compulsory vaccinations for children to attend school? And will you add the coronavirus vaccination to this list when we have a safe and reliable vaccine?
I'm glad you asked that. I am not for any mandate, nor is it medical or anything. No, I would not push for the COVID vaccine, the flu, the HPV, or anything else to be added to the schedule for these children. All right. I'm a parent. I got 2 kids. I've done my research. I've talked to the doctors. I've talked to the nurses. I've made my informed decision. I am going to do what I feel is best for my family. If that means, they can't go to school, I got to homeschool them, then that's what we're going to do. But no, I am not going to mandate any vaccine for any child.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question the way you did, which is mandatory vaccines specifically in schools. And that is something that I do support. And that is designed to protect those who cannot get vaccinated, those who are severely immunocompromised, who have medical exemptions specifically. It is important. The job of government is that overarching, that it is a public health issue. As a public health professional and researcher, that is something that's very important to me. HPV is recommended. It is not required. That's one that's really important. It is not a criminal system. Someone can choose to not vaccinate their children. It is specifically with respect to access to a public or private school environment. And that is something that I do support in protection of all of the children in the school setting. I am very much in support of the existing system in place for medical exemptions as well, when those are necessary and important. And the rest of the system in place is to protect those, again, as I said, who cannot get vaccinated. So it is a balance, and that is really important.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. The next question will go to you first. Since the pandemic is far from over and other pandemics are likely in our future, what should we be doing now to get through this, and how should we be preparing for the future? Dr. Kellis.
Yeah, it is so important to follow the science, to follow the epidemiology, to follow what the epidemiologists are saying. We know because of the research that wearing masks, social distancing, these are scientifically proven. The fact that our federal government is not requiring this as absolutely necessary to address this, and the fact that we are seeing that other countries who have put in place these requirements and have significantly reduced their not only COVID cases, but their deaths. We have one of the highest in the country. That is absolutely critical. So I think using the science, implementing these strategies, also educating specifically about how we address pandemics based on their transmission. This is an airborne transmission. How would we address one that's waterborne? How would we address one? So the various ways, what would we put in place? What would we implement so that we can be prepared for future pandemics? Not if. The understanding at the scientific level is when will that happen? And we need to have that educational outreach.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kellis. Mr. McIntyre.
We need to learn from what is currently going on. We need to stockpile the PPE. We need to ensure that people are trained in dealing with these things. Our medical staff, making sure that we have the capacity to deal with this. But, you know, we also need to regain trust within our government that when they say something, that they're actually leading us down the right path. As Dr. Kellis went and said, you know, I look to Sweden and the way that they handled it with the great success, without mandates of anything, without shutting down, and their economy's back. The people are fine, and they have had deaths, and it's terrible, but that's what's going to happen in a pandemic.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question. And it's a general question to Mr. McIntyre first. What are the areas of our district that need the most attention, and how will you attend to them? Mr. McIntyre.
You know, that's a good question, and I'm not gonna, you know, I'm partial to my Cortland County. That's where I'm born and raised. But I'm not going to say one area, because the entire district is important, from Trumansburg and Spencer area all the way to here in McGraw and Lapeer, just down the road. It's very important, every aspect. So what we need to do is we need to get with our constituents more, and we need to talk to them more and find out what their issues are, so that we can make an informed decision. If I'm elected, or even if, you know, Dr. Kellis is elected, that's what I feel needs to happen, is not just look at a certain area, but the whole district as a whole. There's a lot of areas that feel like they're left out.
Thank you. Dr. Kellis?
Yeah, there are things that I'm hearing from the people as I have been meeting, doing town halls and listening sessions. The things that I'm hearing the most: housing, affordable housing, absolutely critical. And incentivizing that. We have a community housing development fund, for example, here in the county, implementing programs, expanding programs like that, requiring if companies or developers get an IDA, that included in that is affordable housing requirement. Childcare is absolutely critical. We need to have sufficient childcare providers, and they're at risk of closing permanently. Broadband, absolutely critical. It has been highlighted in this pandemic for sure. So creating universal broadband access. And the final one is actually transportation. And having an infrastructure of public transportation that works, that allows people to get to their healthcare needs, to meet their educational needs, and to get to their jobs. We do not have sufficient public transportation systems right now that allow for that. So all of those are critical in order to rebuild our economy. And that's just for people, not,
Thank you.
I haven't gotten to the planet part yet.
Thank you, Dr. Kellis. That concludes the question and answer portion. And now we will ask the candidates for their 2-minute closing statement. Since Mr. McIntyre did the first opening statement, he will also present the first closing statement. Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, thank you. Aristotle once said that the good of all goods is politics. It's literally a life or death situation. So why do I bring that up? Because within that same writing, he mentioned in order to be a good politician or be good in politics, you have to be or have partaken in all the subordinates of politics. I've been in school, I've been in the workforce, I've been blue collar, I've even served you once in the military. You vote for me, you cast a vote for me. I will take that spirit, the spirit of core of the United States Marine Corps, and I will take that to Albany, and I will continue to fight for the 125th District of New York. And you guys will win battles because Marines don't lose, we win. So we will win as a district and we will win as a state.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Dr. Kellis?
Yeah, I want to first thank the League of Women Voters for having this event, hosting it, and all the participants for watching. I believe the role of government is to ensure the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all those who live in the United States. And this requires that the government ensures a distribution of resources so that everyone has a realistic ability to achieve these goals. This year, more than anything, has proven the important role of government itself, particularly local and state government. Here in Tompkins County, for example, the government has helped provide free COVID-19 testing, food, housing, emergency transportation, and small business grants to stabilize the lives of our residents and our community. Our residents need direct relief right now. We need workforce training and job creation and a green economy, stable housing, affordable access to childcare so all parents can fully participate in the workforce, universal health care because employers' benefits are no longer the norm, and municipal broadband so everyone can go to school and work and access healthcare. I have extensive support from a highly diverse group from multiple large labor unions representing both Cortland and Tompkins counties, the Working Families Party and Eleanor's Legacy, as well as the Tompkins and Cortland Democratic committees. I also have support from prominent local, state, and national leaders, including county legislators, authors, physicians, climate activists, and leaders like Zephyr Teachout, Cynthia Nixon, and national senators Chuck Schumer, Kristen Gillibrand, and Senator Bernie Sanders. This is the type of coalition building that is necessary to get important progressive state legislation passed for the people of New York. No one can be at the head of the table, but everyone needs to be at the table for a real solution. I would be honored to have your vote for New York State Assembly, and you can vote now by absentee ballot, early from October 24th through the November 1st, or on Election Day on November 3rd. And you can find more information from me at kellis4ny.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates for participating in this forum. Thanks also to the many members of the League of Women Voters of Tompkins and Cortland counties who spent multiple hours organizing the event. For more information about these candidates and voting, please go to the website vote411.org. That's VOTE 411.org. A quick reminder that October 27th is the last day to postmark an application for absentee ballot by mail. Absentee ballots can also be received by emailing or calling your county board of elections. All completed absentee ballots must be postmarked or delivered to your county board of elections by November 3rd. Early voting will be available from October 24th through November 1st. Watch the screen here after the forum for early voting poll site hours and locations in both Tompkins and Cortland counties. Or check the State League's website at lwvny.org. And please vote. Your vote does count. Thank you and stay safe and well.
And everyone.